So moving on to the bird circulatory system, the blood vessels in the body of the bird are divided into two distinctive circuits known as the pulmonary circuit and the systematic circuit. So this is actually the same as in humans. So there's actually no real difference between the bird's circulatory system and the human's circulatory system. But just in case you don't know what's going on in the bird circulatory system, so basically the pulmonary circuit um, circulates blood through the lungs through the right ventricle, and the left ventricle is the pump for the systematic circuit, which provides blood supply to the tissues of the body. So the pulmonary circuit transports oxygen and poor blood from the right ventricle to the lungs, where the blood picks up the new oxygen or the new picks up a new blood supply, and then it returns the oxygen-rich blood into the left atrium. And then the systematic circuit provides the blood supply to the rest of the body. It carries the oxygen and nutrients to the cells and also picks up waste like carbon dioxide and excretes it, or not, and it excretes it from the body. The systematic circulatory system carries oxygenated blood from the left ventricle through the arteries to the capillaries in the tissues of the organism, and from the tissue of the capillaries, the deoxygenated blood returns into the system of the right atrium of the heart. Thank you for the video.
So today we'll be talking about birds. And if I ask you guys to give us a word that you often associate with birds, you guys will probably say flight or like wings and all that. And you guys will be right. One of the most unique characteristics for birds is that their ability to take flight. And of course, like some reptiles glide through the air from the trees from somewhere high up, and also some mammals do that. But birds is actually one of the few organisms that can truly take flight. And another example of those would be, insects of that sort. So one of the reasons they can take flight is they follow this aerodynamically favorable way when they move through the air, like this in general, like up and down sort of curve. And this actually allows them to maximize the time they will be able to stay in the air, and also it makes them more efficient when they're moving into a certain direction. And also the shape of the bird is normally aerodynamically favorable in a way that you can see this unique shape right here. The air passes through and then splits, and then the bird actually just like kind of like breaks the air and goes through without much pushing against and colliding into the air particles that actually, which is actually in physics the reason why there's air resistance. So it really reduces the air resistance that's dragging it in the opposite way it's going. Um, Also, another reason, like the more physiological reason for birds to be able to fly, is that their unique skeletal structure. So, as we can see here, actually all of their bones are pretty small and fragile, and because they're really light, they really reduce the weight, and like it makes it easier for the birds to actually lift it up through like the air resist the opposite force from the air resistance they get from their wings. But there's one exception, as we can see here. This big piece of like bone that's in front, like in their chest right here, is very noticeable. It's called the keel bone. And what this piece of bone does, it allows all the big muscles that powers the bird wings to attach to this piece of bone. And it gives this support in a way. And you can see better in this picture. So this is the keel bone piece. And all these muscles attach from the base of the wing, and this will be where all the feathers will exist, attached in the base of the wings and to the keel bone, and actually gives support. So when these muscles like drag down the wing and it allows like this motion right here, uh, it actually pushes against this piece of bone, and this piece of bone is very sturdy, and like it's just a big piece of bone. It's a very sturdy and consistent piece that it doesn't allow the skeleton of the bird to fall in onto itself. So it actually does support this kind of intense motion it has. Also, a quick side note, the limbs right here, this limb, but also this limb, like the bird wings are actually homologous to a lot of other limbs from mammals and reptiles, and they all share this like one bone, two bone, a bunch of finger bones pattern that we see in all of a lot of organisms from whales to like us. And this is one of the supports from a theory of evolution, like of a common ancestor existing that essentially diversify into all these species and allows birds to fly and allow us to grab things like into these very different species, which is kind of amazing to think about. Um, Also, another reason besides the skeletal and the muscular system uh, parts is that their respiratory system. So as you can see, in order to power all these big pieces of muscle, as seen in this figure, um, the muscle cells are made of a lot of mitochondria. And what mitochondria does is basically the powerhouse of the cell. It breaks down glucose and it, in a sense, produces carbon dioxide that's part of this carbon waste that fulfills the carbon cycle and all of that. And for this to happen, it needs an electron acceptor called the oxygen to essentially power the system and take up the electron of the electron transport chain. So the mitochondria to function its full extent, it needs the it needs air exchange, it needs oxygen, and to release carbon dioxide. Of course, it can function without oxygen, so the electron transport chain will be shut off. So it won't only be the process of glycolysis that is really not effective in terms of how many ATP is produced by glucose, and also there's a huge side effect, and like it slowly poisons the cells in a way. Um, but anyways, to power these muscle, it needs a lot of air exchange, like gas exchange. And these gas exchange happens in the lung right here, where the capillary vessels would carry the blood into it, and like because there's higher concentration of carbon dioxide in the blood, carbon dioxide would go out into the lung. There's higher concentration of oxygen, hopefully, in the lung, and the oxygen will go into the vessel. And in addition to that, the birds have um, this very unique mechanism called these are the air sacs that are like the abdominal, posterior, anterior, all these air sacs that are branching off from the lung. And what they do, they kind of serves as like a secondary storage of air, and it basically kind of doubles the efficiency of the air exchange here. So as the bird breathes in, the air goes in this way, it goes into the lung, and it also goes into the air sacs. But when the bird breathes out, the diaphragm would also like power like would increase the power increase the pressure here, and it also close all the air sacs that was with the lung, and all these stored air actually comes back out. So there's actually more volume of air and also more surface air in a way coming in and out. And both of these times, because the air stored in the air sac doesn't really undergo a lot, like not they don't undergo as much gas exchange as that of the lung. They actually go back into the lung and does like a second round of air exchange, which like for example for us it doesn't really happen. The air goes into the lung, it fills up with carbon dioxide, and it goes out. So birds actually kind of have double the efficiency, double the amount of air exchange, like the amount of gas exchange than, for example, us in their respiratory system. Of course, there's two proportion. We have like bigger lungs, and if we don't count that, they kind of have double the efficiency. And what this allows them to do, they really allows them to power those cells in the muscle and like power those mitochondria that allows them for this movement that essentially allows them to take flight.